Right here.
I ain't closing nothing!
Don't move.
I don't like jail. I've never been here before.
In the world of extreme prisons, a few stand out for their notorious conditions and grim reputations.
You are dressed hot. But what happened? I was arrested. I know, because I thought you were a prostitute.
Russia's Butyrka Prison, known for its overcrowding and brutal treatment of inmates. India's Tihar Jail has earned its own dark legacy, with reports of overcrowding and corruption. In Egypt, Banha Female Prison, where women face not only overcrowding, but also systemic neglect. These prisons are each unique in their own way. Let's take a closer look at these notorious prisons. You must know.
Who's saying that? Who's saying that?
I said that, homeboy. So check that out.
Shut the up, you ugly.
Hey.
The harsh realm of Polar Owl Prison. Imagine being imprisoned in a place where survival is a daily battle against both the law and nature. Polar Owl Prison, officially known as Penal Colony Number 18, is located in the desolate Arctic Circle. The journey to this facility involves a 3-day trip, starting with a 2-day train ride from Moscow, followed by an exhausting bus journey. Surrounded by ice and engulfed in freezing temperatures reaching -50°C, this prison feels more like a test of endurance than a correctional facility. Home to hardened criminals, including serial killers and political terrorists, Polar Owl's isolation adds another layer of punishment. Notorious inmate Alexander Pushkin, a serial killer with over 60 victims, exemplifies the bleakness of this prison. After his sentencing, he famously remarked that death might be a kinder fate than enduring life here. Inmates face grueling conditions. Each day they remain confined in their cells, sitting in silence until lights out at 10 p.m. Daily outdoor walks offer little solace, as the exercise yard is an enclosed, claustrophobic area with no view of the world beyond. Social interaction is minimal, leaving prisoners mentally isolated, with studies suggesting such solitude can lead to severe psychological issues, including hallucinations and anxiety. Even family visits are rare and challenging, requiring extensive planning and travel. Physical survival aside, the psychological toll of this prison environment is immense. The monotony, lack of community, and brutal cold make Polar Owl one of the world's most isolating penitentiaries. The Polar Owl Prison's impenetrability is legendary. Equipped with multiple layers of iron doors, fences, and 20 guard dogs, it has never witnessed a successful escape. One daring attempt in 2011 by Alexander Elistratov ended tragically when the prison's dogs cornered him, and he was returned to solitary confinement, where he later died. Following this, security measures became even stricter, deterring further escape attempts. The inmates, resigned to their fate, adjust to an existence devoid of freedom and warmth. The prison's harshness pushes the boundaries of human endurance, yet, paradoxically, reveals the profound resilience of the human spirit. Time for something morbid. This image is from an unknown prison, shows just how brutal conditions can be. 4 inmates decided to rebel and fight back against the guards, thinking they could cause some trouble. Unfortunately, their plan backfired, and they were severely brutalized for their actions. However, there are no concrete evidence of this incident. What do you think? Is this real or a hoax? Butyrka Prison, a different kind of suffering. Butyrka Prison, in the heart of Moscow, is well known for its severe overcrowding and unfavorable conditions. This facility, one of the oldest in Russia, often houses over 100 inmates in cells designed for only 10. The cramped, suffocating environment leads to constant tension and violence. Inmates, deprived of privacy, live in a state of perpetual stress. Their lives are a daily struggle, with survival often depending on forming alliances or resorting to aggression. Fights over limited resources such as food are frequent, adding to the chaos within the prison walls. The overcrowding is just the beginning of the suffering at Butyrka. Corruption is rampant, with bribery and illicit activities commonplace. Inmates often bribe guards for privileges, such as better food or access to medical care, which is often subpar. The guards themselves may turn a blind eye to violence in exchange for payment, creating an environment where lawlessness thrives. This corrupt system makes it nearly impossible for inmates to find any semblance of justice or safety. Health concerns are another major issue at Butyrka. Tuberculosis and AIDS spread like wildfire due to the unsanitary conditions, overcrowding, and the frequent sharing of needles among drug users. The prison's medical facilities are inadequate, with overworked staff and limited resources, leaving many inmates without proper treatment. Even minor illnesses can turn deadly due to the lack of proper care. The spread of infectious diseases is also accelerated during transportation, as prisoners are often crammed into tightly packed vans without any precautions to prevent the spread of illnesses. Butyrka's gloomy history dates back to the 17th century, when it was first used as a place to house political prisoners. Over the years, it has housed countless dissidents, intellectuals, and activists, many of whom were subjected to torture and abuse. During the Soviet era, Butyrka became a symbol of state oppression, and its reputation for cruelty and neglect has only grown over time. This dark history continues to haunt the prison as it remains a place where human suffering is systematically ignored. White Swan Prison, a legacy of isolation. The notoriously remote White Swan Prison is situated in Russia's Perm-Krai. It was first constructed in 1938 with the intention of housing the most dangerous offenders. Over time, it became a facility reserved for inmates serving life sentences. With around 300 prisoners, this supermax prison stands out for one key feature: no one is ever released. Inmates are completely isolated from the outside world, unable to receive visitors or communicate with their families. This total separation creates an atmosphere of severe psychological strain. The name White Swan Prison might evoke an image of grace and beauty, but it is anything but that. The name comes from the method used by guards to escort inmates. Their hands are handcuffed at a 90-degree angle, making their movements resemble a swan in flight. While the gesture might seem symbolic, it starkly contrasts with the grim reality of life inside the prison. The isolation at White Swan is psychologically brutal. Inmates are confined to small cells, spending the majority of their time alone. Although psychologists are present to assess inmates and determine their compatibility with potential cellmates, the mental toll is enormous. The lack of human interaction and constant separation from society can cause extreme feelings of loneliness, depression, and despair. The psychological strain is so severe that it often leads to long-term mental health issues, and many prisoners struggle to cope with their isolation. While the prison's schedule includes a small break, a 1-hour outdoor walk each day, and a 10-minute bath once a week, the daily life within White Swan is extremely limited. The outdoor walk provides a brief moment of freedom, but it is tightly controlled, and the bath is more of a necessity than a luxury. The rest of the time, inmates are left alone in their cells, with only their thoughts for company. The lack of social interaction, combined with the harsh conditions, fosters a deep sense of hopelessness. The larger problems in Russia's penal system, where punishment frequently trumps rehabilitation, are exemplified by White Swan Prison. The facility's extreme isolation is a form of punishment that can break even the toughest individuals, raising important questions about the effectiveness of such extreme measures in achieving true rehabilitation. Despite the minimal support provided by psychologists and the brief outdoor moments, the overwhelming focus on punishment leaves little room for healing or change. Black Dolphin Prison, a living nightmare. Black Dolphin Prison, also known as Penal Colony No. 6, is the ultimate in harsh punishment. Reserved for the most dangerous criminals, including serial killers, cannibals, and terrorists, it is a fortress of fear. Guards escort inmates blindfolded with their heads bowed, ensuring they never see the facility's layout. Inmates are confined to their cells 23 hours a day, under 24/7 surveillance. The only break from this monotony is an hour in a small outdoor cage. Meals are minimal, and the prison enforces strict silence. The psychological toll of these conditions is profound, with inmates often succumbing to mental health issues. Despite its reputation, Black Dolphin has no recorded escapes. Its name, derived from a statue at the entrance, masks the cruelty within. The prison symbolizes Russia's harsh stance on crime, but also raises ethical questions about the limits of human punishment. Over its nearly 280-year history, this facility has undergone many changes but has retained its reputation for harshness. It earned its intriguing nickname from a statue of a black dolphin placed at its entrance, a sculpture created by an inmate, symbolizing the prison's legacy. Originally built to house political prisoners, Black Dolphin evolved into a facility for those convicted of the most heinous crimes, including murder, terrorism, and cannibalism. During the Soviet era, the prison became notorious for brutal treatment, including forced labor in factories and infrastructure projects. These practices mirrored the tough attitudes of the time toward punishment. Despite reforms, the echoes of this legacy persist, making Black Dolphin a place synonymous with fear, control, and strict discipline. Today, it houses over 700 of Russia's most dangerous offenders, secured by nearly 900 staff members. The prison's security measures are exhaustive, designed to make escape nearly impossible. Inmates are blindfolded during transfers to keep them disoriented. Each cell is fortified with multiple barriers and equipped with constant surveillance. These measures reflect the facility's long-standing commitment to maintaining order and ensuring that prisoners serve their sentences in complete isolation from the outside world. The mental health challenges faced by inmates at Black Dolphin are profound. Constant surveillance, lack of personal space, and isolation can lead to anxiety, depression, and severe psychological distress. Many inmates grapple with guilt and remorse, reflecting on their crimes in an environment designed to break their spirit. Mental health professionals assess inmates to ensure compatibility when assigning cellmates, but such measures offer limited relief. The environment fosters high tension, sometimes resulting in violent outbursts among prisoners. Reports of mental breakdowns are common, and the lack of substantial mental health support exacerbates these issues. For many, the psychological burden of a life sentence at Black Dolphin is inescapable. Inmates are not only punished physically, but also endure a profound mental struggle. As some prisoners reflect on their actions, the realization of their lifetime confinement often deepens their anguish, leading to a cycle of regret and despair. Santa Marta, Acatitla, Mexico. One of the most infamous female prisons in the world is Santa Marta, Acatitla, which is situated in Mexico City's eastern region. This institution, which was constructed in the middle of the 20th century, has seen decades of unrest, and its sordid past serves as a stark reminder of the systemic problems in Mexico's jail system. For many of the women imprisoned here, Santa Marta, Acatitla is not just a place of incarceration, it's a place of suffering, neglect, and abuse. Upon entering Santa Marta, Acatitla, the first thing that strikes you is the appalling living conditions. Water shortages are a common occurrence, making it difficult for the prisoners to maintain basic cleanliness. The prison's outdated infrastructure is failing, worsening the situation. Broken plumbing, limited medical facilities, and old structures make daily living difficult for the jailed women. The lack of basic comforts and requirements deprives them of their dignity, forcing them to live a daily life defined by deprivation and misery. The prison's reputation for violence is another dark chapter in its history. Santa Marta, Acatitla has become notorious for its frequent incidents of physical and psychological abuse. Prison guards are often the perpetrators of these abuses, subjecting the women to harsh and dehumanizing treatment. The mishandle doesn't stop with the guards. Santa Marta, Acatitla is also a hotbed of criminal activity, with drug trafficking, extortion, and other illicit activities running rampant within its walls. This creates a vicious cycle where women are not only subjected to violence from those in power, but also forced to navigate an environment filled with exploitation and coercion. Many inmates are caught up in these criminal activities simply to survive, further deepening their desperation. For many women, life inside Santa Marta, Acatitla is one of constant fear. The exploitation of the vulnerable is routine, and the lack of oversight means that justice is rarely served. As a result, the women here form close-knit bonds with one another, providing support in an environment that is otherwise devoid of compassion and humanity. Even with international attention and a lot of criticism, attempts to make Santa Marta, Acatitla better have been hampered and delayed. In an attempt to alleviate the prison's many problems, the Mexican government has taken some action, such as lowering overcrowding and enhancing security. However, these programs have encountered severe challenges, including entrenched corruption within the jail system and bureaucratic inertia, which prevent meaningful reform from occurring. Tihar Jail, India. Tihar Jail, one of the biggest and most infamous prison complexes in South Asia, is tucked away in the center of New Delhi. Since its founding in the early 1950s, it has expanded rapidly to house an ever-growing number of prisoners. Over the decades, the prison has witnessed several changes in its operational policies and management as it continuously grapples with the challenges of overcrowding, security concerns, and human rights violations. Tihar Jail is a complex microcosm of the difficulties facing correctional systems around the world, caught between attempts at reform and the harsh realities of its daily operations. At Tihar Jail, overcrowding is perhaps the most pressing issue. Originally designed to house a modest number of prisoners, the facility now struggles to accommodate an ever-growing population. This overcrowding leads to cramped conditions, where inmates are confined to small spaces with little to no room for privacy or movement. These conditions not only infringe on basic human dignity, but also create a breeding ground for disease, with limited access to sanitation and medical care. The slow pace of the judicial system in India has only compounded this problem, with many detainees languishing in prison for years before their cases are even heard. As a result, inmates find themselves trapped in a system that seems more focused on containment than rehabilitation, facing constant uncertainty and a lack of basic amenities that could aid in their recovery. Despite these grim conditions, Tihar Jail has made efforts to introduce educational programs, vocational training, and skill-building initiatives. These programs offer a sliver of hope for inmates, providing them with a chance to gain an education, learn new skills, and prepare for reintegration into society once they are released. In an environment defined by despair, these programs serve as a vital reminder of the potential for change, offering a pathway toward personal growth and empowerment. However, Tihar Jail is far from immune to the darker aspects of prison life. Over the years, the prison has been the site of numerous human rights violations that have drawn the attention of human rights organizations both in India and abroad. Many inmates report mistreatment at the hands of prison staff, with allegations ranging from beatings to inadequate medical treatment. These misapplies not only violate the rights of incarcerated individuals, but also paint a troubling picture of the prison's operational standards. Tihar Jail has witnessed its fair share of violent altercations between inmates in addition to guard violence. With the prison population swelling beyond capacity, tensions inevitably rise, and fights between rival groups are common. These violent incidents further highlight the inadequacies of the prison system, where overcrowding and a lack of resources contribute to an environment where lawlessness often prevails. Corruption within the prison's administrative ranks has also been a persistent issue. Allegations of prison officials being involved in illicit activities, such as bribery or the smuggling of contraband, paint a disturbing picture of the systemic failures within the institution. These problems are not just isolated incidents. They reflect deeper, more ingrained issues that continue to plague the Indian penal system as a whole. Banha Female Prison, Egypt. Banha Female Prison in Egypt, which is tucked away in the Nile Delta, is notorious for its terrible conditions and long history of violating human rights. This infamous facility, which was built to house women convicted of a variety of crimes, has come to represent systematic abuse and neglect. The prison's grim reputation precedes it, with accounts of suffocating overcrowding, unsanitary living conditions, and widespread abuse at the hands of guards. For the women who enter its gates, it is an existence marked by suffering and desperation. Upon arrival at Banha Female Prison, inmates are immediately confronted by a harsh reality: overcrowded cells where women are forced to live in cramped, squalid conditions. The prison, designed to hold a certain number of inmates, often houses many more than it can handle, with several women crammed into spaces meant for far fewer. This severe overcrowding only worsens the already dire circumstances, leaving little room for privacy, dignity, or comfort. The lack of basic sanitary amenities compounds the problem. Clean water is scarce, and hygiene is nearly impossible to maintain, fostering an environment where disease and infections thrive. Without proper ventilation, the cells become stifling hot in the summer, and during the colder months, the lack of heating makes life unbearable. The struggle for basic human needs is constant, and the lack of basic medical care exacerbates the prisoner's suffering. The most frightening element of Banha Female Prison is not the physical torture, but the psychological torment that inmates face. For years, allegations of abuse and mistreatment by prison guards have persisted, creating an environment of dread and secrecy. Women detained at Banha have alleged physical and emotional misapply. These misapplies, which are frequently carried out with impunity, are rarely reported owing to the prison's fearful environment. Prison guards, who are supposed to maintain safety and order, are instead complicit in these human rights violations, using their power to exert control over the women. Inmates live in constant fear of retaliation if they speak out against their mistreatment. The Egyptian government has made little to no attempt to enact reforms, despite multiple reports describing the appalling conditions inside Banha. Human rights organizations worldwide continue to highlight the prison's failures, but the government has shown little interest in addressing the root causes of the abuse. Banha Female Prison remains a dark reminder of the systemic problems that plague the Egyptian penal system, where punishment seems to outweigh rehabilitation and the lives of incarcerated women are left in a state of neglect. According to recent reports, the situation within Banha has not changed, and detainees are still suffering under the prison's repressive rule. Calls for reform have been disregarded, and there appears to be no genuine attempt to improve the living conditions of these women. The emphasis on punishment over rehabilitation persists, depriving women of their fundamental rights and dignity. Rayong Central Prison, Thailand. A prison that serves as an example of the broader challenges that correctional systems encounter globally is Rayong Central Prison, which is situated in the center of Rayong Province, Thailand. Although Rayong Central Prison was originally designed as a rehabilitation facility, it has since grown into a sad example of how jails can become havens for abuse, suffering, and institutional neglect. Because of its long history of overcrowding, corruption, and poor living conditions, it represents the complex and often contentious relationship between criminal justice and human rights. Rayong Central Prison was established as part of Thailand's larger penal system, with the goal of serving as a correctional facility that assisted in the reformation of criminals. However, the reality of prison life inside its walls is far from rehabilitative. The facility, originally designed to house a modest number of inmates, has for years struggled with severe overcrowding, a situation worsened by the high number of individuals incarcerated for drug-related offenses. This influx of prisoners has stretched the prison to its breaking point, leading to cramped and poorly ventilated cells that only amplify the misery of those trapped inside. The circumstances of Rayong Central Prison have frequently been condemned as harsh. The lack of room, along with poor sanitation, produces a poisonous environment for the women jailed there. Hygiene is an ongoing challenge, with basic sanitary facilities frequently insufficient or failing. Access to clean water and efficient waste disposal is limited, increasing the risk of disease. Inmates are typically uncomfortable due to the heat and lack of air circulation, which contributes to a pervasive sense of oppression in the jail. The absence of sufficient medical care exacerbates the situation, as inmates do not have consistent access to treatment for illnesses or injuries, resulting in suffering that is frequently disregarded or overlooked. Despite these harsh conditions, the women of Rayong Central Prison have developed a sense of community that helps them survive the daily grind of their harsh reality. They lean on one another for emotional and psychological support, forming bonds in a place that strips them of their freedom and dignity. In a world where basic human rights are often denied, this solidarity is a powerful reminder of the resilience of the human spirit. Allegations of mistreatment by prison staff are common, with many former inmates reporting incidents of physical abuse, verbal assaults, and psychological torture at the hands of the guards who are supposed to protect them. The lack of accountability and oversight allows these abuses to continue unchecked, leaving inmates vulnerable to exploitation and harm. In addition to the abuse from prison staff, there have also been widespread reports of corruption within the prison system itself. Prison officials have been implicated in a range of illicit activities, including drug trafficking and the extortion of inmates. These criminal activities, which are allowed to flourish within the prison walls, further tarnish the reputation of Rayong Central Prison and contribute to its toxic environment. The corruption not only harms the incarcerated women but also prevents meaningful reform from taking place, trapping the facility in a cycle of abuse and neglect. Butyrka Prison, Afghanistan. Located on the outskirts of Kabul, the capital of Afghanistan, Butyrka Prison is a stark symbol of the country's tumultuous political landscape and the horrors that have unfolded within its walls. Established in the 1970s, Butyrka quickly became notorious for its brutal treatment of detainees, including political prisoners, dissidents, and women caught in the web of Afghanistan's shifting regimes. Over the years, this high-security facility has served as a grim reminder of how political upheaval, corruption, and systemic violence can define the experience of incarceration. Inside Butyrka, the conditions have always been harsh. The prison was originally designed to hold a certain number of prisoners, but overcrowding has been a constant problem, exacerbated by the country's ongoing instability and the frequent imprisonment of political opponents and protesters. Inmates, particularly women, are often crammed into small, unsanitary cells with little access to basic necessities. Sanitation is a significant issue in Butyrka, with many prisoners living in filthy conditions, which can lead to the spread of diseases. The absence of adequate medical services further worsens the situation, leaving inmates to suffer from untreated illnesses and injuries. This lack of basic care not only compromises the health of the women imprisoned here, but also highlights the systemic neglect that has plagued Afghanistan's prison system for decades. Inmates face constant physical and emotional abuse, both from fellow prisoners and, more disturbingly, from the guards themselves. The threat of violence looms large, with many women reporting incidents of physical abuse, sexual violence, and exploitation. The daily struggle to survive in this hostile environment is compounded by the ongoing sense of fear and uncertainty. Life inside Butyrka is a relentless battle for basic survival, and many inmates find solace in the rare moments of solidarity they share with one another. The dark history of Butyrka is stained with atrocities that have left a permanent mark on its legacy. Over the years, the prison has become synonymous with torture, extrajudicial killings, and human rights violations. During times of intense political strife, Butyrka served as a detention center for those who opposed the ruling regime. Detainees were often subjected to brutal interrogations, physical beatings, and psychological torture, with little regard for international human rights standards. One of the most chilling chapters in the prison's history was its role in the mass executions that occurred during various regime changes. Butyrka was notorious for holding public trials that were often little more than a facade for the execution of political prisoners. The fear of arbitrary death sentences hung over the prison, and many individuals, especially those suspected of disloyalty to the government, were executed without proper legal process. The disappearance of prisoners is another dark aspect of Butyrka's history. Many individuals who were taken to the prison simply vanished. Their families never knew what happened to them, whether they were executed, died from mistreatment, or were locked away in isolation. This pattern of enforced disappearances has left families in despair, their loved ones' fates forever unknown. Despite its grim history, Butyrka remains a focal point for international human rights organizations, which continue to call for reforms. The ongoing issues of overcrowding, lack of medical care, and physical abuse are compounded by the prison's deeply entrenched legacy of violence and oppression. Although the Afghan government has taken some steps toward improving prison conditions, Butyrka remains a stark reminder of the monumental challenges that face the country's correctional system. Banha Prison, Colombia. Banha Prison is located in the middle of Bogotá, Colombia, and holds the country's female inmates. The prison's history is inextricably linked to Colombia's turbulent past, which has included civil strife, drug battles, and social instability. Founded in the early 20th century, Banha has grown to become the largest women's correctional prison in the country. It serves as a striking reminder of Colombia's effort to integrate the complexity of crime, punishment, and rehabilitation against the backdrop of societal unrest. Banha Prison is emblematic of the deep challenges faced by the Colombian justice system. Over the years, this facility has become a microcosm of the broader societal issues that have plagued the nation, especially in terms of overcrowding and limited resources. As Colombia grapples with issues like drug trafficking and violence, Banha finds itself overburdened, often housing more women than it was ever designed to accommodate. Overcrowding is not just a statistical issue. It directly impacts the daily lives of the women living within the prison. Cells are cramped, and privacy is a luxury few can afford. The strain on the prison's resources is significant, leading to shortages of basic amenities. With inadequate sanitation facilities, the risk of health problems among inmates is high. The spread of diseases is a constant concern, with few resources available to address the medical needs of the incarcerated women. Despite these dire conditions, one of the most striking aspects of Buen Pastor Prison is the resilience and solidarity among its inmates. In the face of overwhelming adversity, the women in Buen Pastor have found ways to form strong, supportive communities. They often lean on each other for emotional and psychological support, creating bonds that help them survive the hardships of prison life. These networks of solidarity provide a sense of camaraderie and hope, even in the bleakest of environments. In recent years, Buen Pastor Prison has found itself at a critical crossroads. The Colombian government has acknowledged the pressing need for prison reform, especially in regard to the overcrowding and poor living conditions. Rehabilitation efforts have been introduced, with programs aimed at providing vocational training, educational opportunities, and psychological support to help inmates reintegrate into society once they are released. While these efforts are a step in the right direction, they are still in the early stages of what is expected to be a long and challenging journey toward meaningful change. The goal is to transform Buen Pastor from a facility that punishes and neglects its inmates into one that respects their basic human rights, providing them with the tools for rehabilitation and reintegration into society. However, these reforms are not without their obstacles. Bureaucratic delays, insufficient funding, and the continued challenges mean that the improvements made thus far are only a small fraction of what needs to be done. The fight for justice and dignity within Buen Pastor is ongoing, and the road to transformation is fraught with difficulties. Buen Pastor is not just a prison, it is a symbol of Colombia's ongoing struggle to balance the needs of its criminal justice system with the protection of human rights. The facility reflects the interconnectedness of societal issues in Colombia, where economic inequality, the drug trade, and social unrest have shaped the experiences of both the incarcerated and the society at large. The women within Buen Pastor, many of whom have been sentenced for crimes tied to poverty or the country's illegal drug economy, are often the most vulnerable members of society. Their fates are intertwined with the larger political and economic forces at play. And that concludes our look into Russia's Owl Prison, where temperatures can plunge as low as 50 degrees Celsius, leaving prisoners to face one of the harshest conditions imaginable. From the freezing cold to the severe isolation, this facility serves as a chilling reminder of the extremes of incarceration. While it's a place where the toughest criminals are sent to pay for their crimes, the dire conditions also highlight the lengths to which the Russian penal system goes in maintaining control. What do you think? Does a prison like this serve justice, or is it a human rights violation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss another deep dive into the world's most extreme places. Thanks for watching,